A story I found on r/scary stories. Every summer, the kids in my town are forced to attend mandatory summer camp. It held a horrific secret. I was 13 years old when I first saw a kid try to escape. Clara Danvers was a senior at Aceville High School. She wore pastel colors and flower crowns in her hair. I didn't know her very well since I attended the middle school down the road, but I knew she was one of the most popular girls in her class. Clara was the type of all girls in our school aspired to be. Her beauty wasn't eye-catching in a town like Aceville, where all of its people were ridiculously attractive. Clara was running in the inevitable summer camp. Camp was mandatory in Aceville. At the time, I wasn't sure why. All I knew that all 18-year-olds were obligated to attend camp for the remainder of their summer before college. And yes, you would be right in thinking if it was practically a human rights violation. It was their summer. Aceville's kids were teetering on the edge of adulthood and responsibilities, their teen years and beloved childhood dwindlings, and that last summer meant a lot to them. Of course they fought back. Clara Danvers didn't strike me as a rebel. She looked like the type of girl who followed all the rules and joined as many extracurriculars as possible. She had the perfect friends, the perfect boyfriend, straight A's, and was Harvard bound, according to a word of mouth traveling. However, on July 16th, 2016, I saw a different side to her. The memory was vague, though I remember small tidbits. I remember being in the store with my the kind of heat I hated. It was too warm to straight, and all I wanted to do was sit in the backyard and read. I didn't have a choice whether I accompanied my mother, though she had blackmailed me with a reward of giving a new car. Mom was talking to the cashier. She was all friends with half the town, so I wasn't surprised when every person she passed bid a hello, shooting a smile at me. I remember being bored. I needed to very of being seen shopping with my mom. It was pretty much a social death for a 7th grader to be seen with their mom. So, keeping my head down, I pulled my baseball cap further over my face. I headed over to the comic book section. All my favorites were there, and I had $10 to spend. I was in my element. Skimming through Spider-Man issues, I found myself captivated by the colors. Spider-Man was a kid's comic. I knew that. I made a mistake of pulling one out of my backpack at school, only for Summer Forrest to snatch it out of my hand and hold it in the air with a wicked smile on her face. Do you still read Spider-Man? No, I snapped back, my cheeks burning bright. Liar, you still read Spider-Man. Isn't that for, like, little kids? I shrugged. It's a good comic book. It's for kids, Summer laughed. You're so weird, Adeline. I'm not gonna say it. It was traumatizing. Some kids had laughed along, and some had ignored Summer. I snatched the comic off of her and shoved it back in my bag. Then on the way to class, I shoved it into the trash and started watching makeup YouTube tutorials. I still wasn't completely healed from the incident, so ignoring a smiling Mary Jane in a funky lab coat, I moved on to more adult comics. Well, they were adults in my kid brain at least. Picking up Teen Titans, I flipped it over and scanned the back. Mom was still chattering to the cashier, and my urge to pee wasn't going away. I figured stepping outside to cool off would be a good idea, even when I knew I was just stepping back into the baking heat, away from the pathetic cooling fan sitting near the door. My plan was to go back to the car and blast the AC. Mom was going to be there for a while. I could tell by the way she was leaning against the counter, already making her routes. I was sliding into my mom's car, trying not to wince when my bare legs sunk into the hot leather. A scream rang out, startling me. When I twisted around, scanning the parking lot in front of the store, I saw her, Clara Danvers, dressed in shorts and t-shirt, her sneakers pounding against the steaming tarmac, her strict blonde ponytail flying behind her. Clara was running for her life. At first, I thought she was running from some kind of animal. Coyote attacks are common, but not in broad daylight. Except Clara wasn't running from an animal. I recognized Mrs. Peters, one of the high school teachers. Mom had been friendly with her. Mrs. Peters was in her mid-40s and wore thick sweaters in 90-degree heat. That's the last thing I'd ever see was that teacher sprinting after a retreating senior. The kind of look in her eyes that I'd known my whole life, replaced with a look of intense determination. It was almost comical, like I was watching a cartoon. I laughed. I felt bad, but it was hard to ignore the hysterical spew of laughter crawling out of my throat. Clara was a good runner. Maybe she was on a track team, though Mrs. Peters, amazingly, was faster. She was in good shape for her age, long strides catapulting her further forwards, swinging her arms, driving momentum. Clara Danvers! The teacher wasn't out of breath, though neither was Clara. Neither of them were giving up. Watching the bizarre display, I found myself following them, though I was slower, darting behind parked cars, keeping myself hidden. There was something clutched in Clara's hand. When she brought it to her ear, her eyes wide and wild, lips moving frantically, I realized she was talking to someone. When Clara twisted around to scan for the teacher, I knew she had made a mistake. I watched the scene unravel in front of me, like it was going in slow motion. Clara's phone slipped from her grasp and she let out a sharp cry, ducking to try to snatch it back up. But the teacher was on her tail. Mrs. Danvers, you are acting like a child. The teacher reached out and snatched the girl by the back of her shirt. Clara shrieked, trying to battle her way out of the teacher's grasp, but Mrs. Peters' grip was harsh, her fingernails sticking into the bare flesh of Clara's arm. Get off of me! The girl was acting like a caged animal, and I didn't understand. It was just camp, right? I understood Clara and her class not wanting to go, because it was their last summer to be free and kids again. Maybe the girl was acting dramatic, but I could empathize with her. I watched Mrs. Peters drag the girl, spitting, cursing away. I can still remember their words. Clara Danvers didn't swear. At least that's what I thought. She was the golden girl, after all. Clara was yelling names, presumably those of her friends, and Mrs. Peters was struggling to keep a hold of her. Miss Danvers, please calm down. We were very clear at the assembly that we would take necessary measures to make sure every senior is on that bus. Clara dug the soles of her Converse into a tarmac. She reminded me of a petulant child throwing a tantrum. I don't want to go to camp. I have my own life, you know. You are part of this town as well as the high school, which means rules still apply. But I'm 18. I'm a legal adult. Mrs. Peters ignored her outburst. As I said, you are still a student. Therefore, you are expected to follow the rules. One of them is at the senior class will attend a mandatory summer camp before college. This has been going on for years, Mrs. Danvers. I expected more from a class valedictorian. The teacher sighed, like the girl was a defiant little kid. You have been one of the smartest in your class since freshman year, Clara. I did not expect this lack of intelligence from you. Do not ruin your reputation by acting like a child. Clara sputtered. Oh, I'm the child? You just sprint after me for 3 blocks over a fucking summer camp, and I'm acting like a kid. Clara, stop. I will if you let go. Hey, you're hurting me. The two of them were getting further away, and all I could do was watch the shadows stretching across the sidewalk. I was debating whether to follow them to wherever they were going, but then a hand was grabbing my shoulder. I twisted around and found my mother. She didn't look mad or confused. Mom didn't question why I had disappeared. Instead, her gaze had snapped to where I'd been watching Claire and the teacher. Mom's eyebrows furrowed, her lips curling like she was about to say something before she seemingly snapped out of it. Mom shoved paper bags of groceries into her arm with a light smile, and I struggled to get a strict hold of them. She was looking at me, but I could have sworn her gaze was wandering, searching for something. Did you pick up a comic book, honey? I took my head. It felt kind of sick. Clara Danvers didn't have a choice whether she went to camp or not. None of her class did. I shook my head. Whenever they tried to skip out, they were treated like animals. For summer camp? I couldn't understand why it was mandatory. No other town forced their kids to go to camp, so why did ours? I tried to smile at Mom. Can we just go home? Mom looked at me like she was going to protest, but nodded. She had that expression, the one I dreaded, when she was trying to read me, delving into my mind. I wasn't a talkative kid, so my mom turned into a therapist on that occasion. However, it was different. She paid no attention to my sickly cheeks and the lump in my throat. All right, Mom inclined her head. I tried to ignore her craning my neck. She was definitely aware of Claire Danvers being wrestled onto a school bus. Are you sure you're okay? I chose to ignore the terrified faces of seniors pressed against buses' windows. Yeah, I said, I just feel sick. Okay, let's go get something to drink. I don't know how I managed to keep my mouth shut and nod, following Mom back to the car. It wasn't like Aceville's bizarre rule was a secret. I just didn't want to talk about it. Neither did Mom, from the look on her face. Instead of grilling me like usual, she took me to a chocolate fudge sundae at our local diner. I still remember the sickly feeling in my stomach when I struggled to swallow, washing it down with Coke. I tried hard to pretend everything was okay, but I couldn't stop thinking about Clara and the way she's been treated. Dread filled me like poison, shivers rattling down my spine. I couldn't sit still. Was that my future? Was I going to be hunted down like that? That's what I kept thinking when Mom was talking excitedly about her plans for our next family vacation. I was discreetly counting on my fingers and how many years I'd turned before 18, until seeing Clara dragged like an animal by a teacher. I considered one of the nicest people in town. I looked forward to 18. It was the age of independence, the peak of teenagehood. Though my excitement turned to dread, I never saw Clara again, or the class of 2016. It's a well-known fact that freshly graduated kids go to camp, then straight to college. But I still found it strange. Once they're gone, the town forgot about them and turned their attention to a new senior class. I watched this happen for 5 years, kids following Clara's footsteps. She had started the rebellion after all, though none of them came close to escape like her. I watched them tear through the woods, laughing, whooping like it was a game. The girls stripped down to two-piece swimsuits, and in 2018, Mikey Blake streaked. It went almost viral. Clara's story spread like a virus, and seniors took it as an opportunity to one-up her. I guess it became something less to be scared of and more to anticipate. Sure, no kid wanted to be stuck at summer camp, but it was the hunt beforehand that excited them. They were always caught, always wrestled to the ground and treated like Clara Danvers. Over the years, however, it became less scary to watch and more exciting, like watching the latest blockbuster. Who didn't want to watch the kids be chased by teachers with way too much time on their hands? I watched them year after year. My friends and I made bets on who would and wouldn't get caught. We sat on the sidewalk with soda and burgers from the diner, cheering them on. We didn't pay attention to how they were treated. In our minds, it was fun. I won $200 in 2019. I bet my friends, at least 5 seniors, would try to skip town, and they did. Aceville felt like it was stuck in limbo between the 1980s and the present. Sure, we had cell phones and TikTok. My aunt and uncle drove a total boomer mobile. Our local diner had an old aesthetic. Half the town didn't have televisions. Maybe they preferred to stay in the old days, though it's not like I was complaining. I liked it. I liked that we were different from the others. Aceville. An idealistic town where there were more teens than adults. My friend Nick used to joke that it was like living in a world of Stranger Things. I'd agree. Luckily, though, we weren't under the threat from aliens from different dimensions and teenagers like Carrie like powers. 5 years after Clara, after saying the same shit year after year, it was finally our turn. The class of 2020. I was standing in the exact same store when I had been 5 years ago when I first saw Clara, when I witnessed the hunt. This time, however, I wasn't with my mother. I managed to score a part-time job to pay for college, and I just finished my shift. Smells Like Teen Spirit was playing on the millionth time that day on the crappy intercom radio. I did suggest the owner invest in an Alexa and got a Kids These Days lecture in these return. He couldn't afford a decent radio, so every single song I liked had been mercilessly murdered. Thankfully, the store was empty that afternoon. It was a hot summer day in the middle of July, and the majority of town minus my class were at the local swimming pool cooling off. This was the kind of heat that made me want to bury my head in the ground. There was zero aircon, so I'd been fanning myself with old pan flips. It was my last day at the job, and I had been rewarded with half my wage and a crushed piece of chocolate cake wrapped in a napkin. Have fun at camp, was all my boss said, his smile a little too wide. I had doubts when that asshole had already gambled the rest of my wage on whether my class would be captured or not. Throwing the cake away, I stuffed the crumpled notes in my shorts. I should have been thinking about college that day. I should have been thinking about how the hell I was going to pay for my tuition with barely $300, but I wasn't. I just had to survive the day. Then I think about college. Checking my phone, I made sure I had blocked my mother, as well as my aunt and my uncle. Dad wasn't in the picture. Not much to say, I never knew him. Dad went for milk and cigarettes and never came back. Checking and rechecking that time. I pulled off my work shirt and stuffed it in the trash. I definitely attracted attention looking like a neon traffic light. I had spent the last hours of my shift going over the plan in my head. It wasn't foolproof, but we had thought up it while drunk and high on mushrooms, but it was still a plan. Stepping out into the restless heat, I was hopeful. Unlike my classmates, I was enjoying their game. I had no intention off of going to camp. I had been curious as a kid, but over the years the novelty had worn off. It was my last summer with Nick and Bobby, and I was going to spend every day with them doing what I wanted. We were going to spend half the year planning a road trip to Florida, and I was going to use the time away from town to finally clean to Mom about Bobby. I was going to tell her everything, disappearing for summer, sneaking back in September and grab my things. I didn't have plans for post-summer. I was far enough for my dream college, but it was my lack of cash. Mom wasn't that well off and had made it clear that if I wanted to go to college, I had to pay for it myself. The talkie in my head was store-bought. Nick had thrown it me the night before. I scanned the parking lot. So far, it was clear. Tying my hair into a ponytail, I stepped out into a sticky air that made my skin crawl. I twisted the dial on the talkie and held it to my mouth. Before I could speak, Nick's voice came through in a burst of hissing static. Fuck, it's hot. They couldn't have picked a worse day to play their little game. Rolling my eyes, I couldn't resist a smile. What are the talkies for again? You forgot to say over. What are the talkies for? I paused a moment. Over. Because it's fun, Nick shot back. I could hear his heavy breathing as he catapulted into a run. Are you at the store? I'm heading towards the car, he paused. So far, no sign of teachers, which is a bad sign. That means they're lying in wait. I choked out a laugh. Nicholas, are you enjoying this? Our only entertainment is TikTok. After catching fireflies in mason jars, he laughed. Of course I'm enjoying this. He left out a sharp hiss. Oh shit, I've got visuals on Miss Cater. She's on a warpath. Just gone past the dry cleaners. I'm going to need you to go slowly. I'm going slowly. No, I mean like slow motion slowly. Let's focus on getting out of here, and I started walking, checking for the pursuers. According to the mass text the school had sent all morning, all seniors were expected to be on the bus 1:30. It was 1:15. The plan was to get Nick's car where he had stuffed all of our bags the night before and step on it. Of course, parents had figured we were going to try and flee town, so our car has been confiscated. Luckily, though, Nick worked at a junkyard. He's spent months turning a hunk of junk into a decent enough to ride, so we were already one step ahead of them. Starting to jog, I leaped across the parking lot. Bobby, you there? My stomach sank when the name escaped my lips. I'd feeling I've been fighting since we were returning with a vengeance. It wasn't confusing when I was 14 and had butterflies. No, it was guilt. I made a promise I would tell Mom about us, but Mom was different. She wouldn't understand. She hated the idea of me dating. I took a guy home for dinner in sophomore year, and she politely told him to leave. When he didn't, Mom started screaming at him. Mom was already weird about Bobby just being a friend. I had zero doubt she was going to freak out when I told her it was actually something more. Bobby's voice was soft and smooth, slipping so effortlessly, though static like it belonged in here. I'm about 2 minutes away. I raided my mom's kitchen for snacks before I left. Nick whooped. See, this is why I prefer you over Addie. This time I sputtered. That hurts. I've been working. I could see the grin in his voice. You're not making your case any better. Bobby's voice cut through our laughter. Did you tell your mom about us, Addie? I stopped laughing, my footsteps faltering. The sun was a bastard baking into my back, and I struggled to speak through the breath that caught in my throat. I was struggling to crease basic words when I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Expecting it to be a teacher, I started backing away, lowering my hand, holding the talkie, but then I glimpsed familiar blonde curls tied into pigtails, catching the sun almost perfectly. The figure wasn't that far away, but I saw all of her, and I felt myself shatter. I wanted to tell Mom. I really did, but it was hard. Robin Atwood was the first person I fell for. Bobby was beautiful. Every other kid in town, I was still struggling to figure out how she liked someone like me. I had a stubby nose, and my eyes were to fall apart. In a town full of pretty people, I finally felt like a bad egg. It sucked that my parents gave me bad genes. Robin was perfect. Angelic features, a heart-shaped face, hair like liquid silk. Bobby was out. She had told her mother when we started dating. I chickened out. Luckily, our moms weren't mutual friends. If they were, fuck camp. I'd probably be at a military school. Bobby's smile was sweet, though I did raise my eyebrows at her prom's dress. Not exactly the best outfit to escape town in, but her shoes were cute. Bobby's hair was tied back, straight curls dancing in her eyes. She was sweating, her cheek paler than usual. Bobby was an anxious person in general, so the escape plan was probably tearing her apart inside. Still, she put on a brave face. Instead of talking about my mom, she pulled me into a quick hug, lacing her fingers into mine. I knew that conversation about my cowardice was coming, but it couldn't wait. Bobby reached in her tote bag, pulling out a share pack of candy and waving them in my face. Did you get these for the car ride, since you promised to talk to your mom? But I'm sure I'll eat them on my own. I scoffed, shoving her. When she laughed, thanks. I'll give them to Nick. I tried to snatch the pack off of her. I'm pretty sure he's allergic, so good luck killing him. Nick's laugh came through, tangled in static. I look forward to being poisoned. Bobby was fast, so were her instincts. Before I could grab them, she shoved them in her bag, her lips splitting into a grin. She was pissed, but she wasn't pissed enough for an argument. Well, it wasn't like we had time for an argument. We should get going. Bobby squeezed my hand. Let's go. At the moment, all the dread eating me up inside slipped away. I pulled Bobby into a run, and when we left the parking lot, darting across the street, I could hear yelling in the distance. No doubt our classmates were either getting caught or pulling a fast one. Nick, I said into a talkie, are you close? To my surprise, there was no answer. Nick had found every opportunity to use damn things, so it was strange he disappeared. Bobby talked to her, tried her talkie. Nick, are you there? The junkyard was 5-minute walk, maybe a 2-minute run if he sprinted. Nick wasn't answering. The closer we got to the junkyard, a bad feeling started coiling in the pit of my gut. When I slowed down, bending over my hands on my knees, gasping into a humid air, Bobby tried contacting Nick again. She shook the talkie with a frown. Maybe it's faulty. I fixed her with a skeptical look. Both of them? Straightened up and pulled my phone out of my shorts. 25 past 20 teachers were most likely doing a head count and were already on a prowl. I was shaking with adrenaline. We should get to the car, I gasped out. Our best case scenario is the idiot got distracted or broke the talkie. We shouldn't assume the worst. Bobby nodded, though her smile was thin. When we started running again, our shoes pounded on the steaming tarmac. I felt a rush of deja vu. My ponytail flew behind me, and I was pumped, my arms and legs hard, propelling my body faster. It was just like Clara. Unlike her, I was gonna make it. At least that's what I thought. The junkyard was in my sight. When the talkie crackled with static, I was frowning at the mass of beaten up cars covered in dirt and old engines, when an all too familiar voice filled the air. Adeline Calstone and Robin Atwood. The voice of our math teacher, Mr. Fuller, sent shivers crawling down my spine. I felt sick. There was no way he had tracked us down that fast. How was that even possible? Suddenly, all I could think about was Clara. All I could think about the way she was dragged, kicking and screaming, and our class had treated it like a game. That was it until it was our turn. Mr. Fuller's voice was stern. I suggest abandoning whatever plan you have and making your way into the school bus, please. When I was considering smashing the talkie against the gravel sidewalk, he continued, Your friend Nick Castor was a good runner. I'll give him that, but not fast enough. I was expecting more from a varsity captain. Asshole, Nick grumbled through the talkie. I took us all the way to regionals. Twisting around, my heart dropped into my gut. Nick's voice wasn't just clear in the talkie, it was close, too close. Bobby pulled her hand from mine and squeaked, her hand slapping over her mouth. Whenever I saw the two of them coming towards us, Mr. Fuller was dragging Nick. I had a split-second thought of grabbing Bobby and running for it, but I wasn't going to leave my best friend. It didn't take long for the three of us rounded up. Nicholas Castor, the quintessential high school golden boy. He stood at an impossible 6 feet with a lean, athletic build that spoke years to dedication on the football field. His dark brown hair was awkwardly styled, and his freckled dust skin almost gave him a boyish charm. I used to have a crush on Nick as a little kid. Then he opened his mouth. Now the boy was like a more annoying, bolder brother. Are the restraints really necessary? Nick spat when we were cuffed and pushed in the back of Mr. Fuller's car. Some people might call it kidnapping, but in Aceville, July 16th, it was the norm. We squeezed together in the back. Fuller's car was a dinosaur. I'm pretty sure he was listening to music on a tape player. Nick tried singing along on his attempt to annoy the teacher into letting us go. I think he was trying to sing badly, but the guy was a decent singer. Halfway through Highway to Hell, it was a surprisingly good guitar solo, and he was somehow managing with his arms pinned back completely with annoying mouth noises. I dug my elbow into his gut. Nicholas Castor failed a lot of things, like reading the room, for example, and social cues. He was supposed to be testing for ADHD, but according to the school, Nick was too sociable to be neurodivergent. I called bullshit, but his parents agreed. The car ride didn't take long, and it was uncomfortable. The three of us were squashed like sardines with barely any space to move or breathe. Nick's knee was digging into my back, Bobby's head in my lap. We arrived. At school, we were thankfully uncuffed and transferred to the bus. I wasn't expecting us to be the ones they were waiting on. I also wasn't expecting a round of sarcastic applause. Even Sadie and Danny had been caught. Nick did a mocking bow, and Fuller thwacked the back of his head. I told you wouldn't make it, Jake Carlstein yelled. Bobby pulled a face. At least we tried. When I was pushing my way back to the bus, keeping a tight hold of Bobby's hand and Nick's sleeve, we were greeted by a deluge of faces. Some kids held their hands up for high fives, which Nick happily slapped, but majority of them looked disappointed. If we'd failed to escape, then it really was impossible. There was no way out. Camp was inevitable. I found a seat quickly, right at the back, pulling Nick and Bobby next to me. Well, that failed, Nick set out a nervous laugh when the bus started moving. Your fault, Bobby grumbled. If you weren't kidnapped by our math teacher, we'd already be halfway out of town right now. Nick tipped his head back with a laugh. Oh yeah, I'm so sorry for being chased for 3 blocks and threatened with a rock. He threatened to throw a rock at you? Nick didn't meet my gaze. Yep, this guy's a fucking psycho. I had to surrender. I told you guys like 15 times that man is bad news, but you never listened to me. He trailed off and my gaze wandered. Like, for example, Nick continued, I could say Fuller was my father, and you'd say, oh wow, really? That's really cool, Nick. That boy's babbling faded into a dull murmur in my head, and I was frowning at the two men dressed in black that had jumped at the last minute. They didn't look like anyone I knew. Two of them stationed themselves at the front. They didn't really fit in a whole summer camp aesthetic. Nick was talking when the sound slammed into me. And that's why I don't get it. Glenn was a great character and they just killed him. Brutally, too. His head looked like a deflated beach ball. I had no choice to settle down in my seat and let the nauseating movements of the bus send my stomach hurting into my throat. Nick pulled out his switch and Bobby laid her head against the window. I guess none of them wanted to talk, though I didn't blame them. Nick wanted to show me his new game, but I got bored. The lore was confusing and kept going off in tangents, forgetting about what he said. When my phone buzzed in an hour into the journey, I switched it off without looking at the screen. I had zero interest talking to my smug mother, but I don't know how long we were on the bus, but at points I felt like we were going in circles. I could have sworn we had passed the same sign, but when I pointed it out, Nick mumbled something unintelligible, and Bobby was sleeping. Outside, the sky turned eerily dark. I could have been wrong, but I'm sure we had been on the bus for hours, and nobody was questioning it. The others were either asleep or had earphones corked in, and when we came to an abrupt stop, Bobby woke, and Nick put his switch away. The rest of the class seemed to trance out like a state that had swallowed them up. They had started to ask questions. We were all ignored. Instead, one of the two men I'd spotted earlier stood up and addressed us. "Could I have your attention, please?" He cleared his throat. "My name is Lawrence Shade, and I'm a recruiter. In a few minutes, you will all watch a small film we have prepared, which will give us an idea where to categorize you. Please be aware, watching the film is mandatory." "What?" Summer Forest laughed. "This is a joke, right? Isn't this supposed to be a camp?" As soon as the words escaped her lips, I pressed my face against the window. It was no raining, no pouring. But I don't understand how I didn't notice. Nick leaned over me, his expression crumpling. "When did it get so dark?" Bobby nodded. "How long have we been on this bus?" Before I could answer, a portable screen in front of me lit up with a white screen and turned green, then yellow, flickering from color to color, flashing my eyes. Nick snorted. "What the fuck is this?" But he was watching the screen, Bobby too. It was drawing them in, leeching onto their minds. Murmuring on the bus confirmed my classmates were equally confused. I squeezed it shut at first, but I was overcome with an overwhelming sense of curiosity. I let my eyes flicker open, but as soon as my gaze landed on the screen, on flashing colors, hitting in quick succession, a sharp pain rumbled in my right temple. The colors kept going. I remember the sequence perfectly. Red, yellow, blue, green, repeat. I don't know how long I was staring at the colors. I don't know how long my body's been frozen, my eyes unblinking, but I could feel my body reacting. My mouth was open, unable to close. Then a sliver of drool running down my chin. There was something warm sliding in my nostril. I couldn't wipe it away, like my body was stuck, like I was paralyzed, like I'd never move again. Next to me, Nick and Bobby were also frowning at the colors, but unlike me, they could move. Bobby was blinking, trying to keep up with them. Nick was slowly inclining his head, his lips muttering silent words I couldn't understand. But just like that, the screen flashed off. Bobby drew in a sharp breath and straightened in her seat. Nick blinked rapidly. I expected him to freak out, but he was strangely quiet. "Addie?" Bobby's eyes found mine. "Your nose." Swiping gingerly at my nose with my bare arm, I let out a shuddery breath. We had to get out. Whatever this place was, it wasn't summer camp. I could hear hisses around me, at the back of the bus and in front, voices collapsing to a white noise. Whenever I risked turning my head, I spotted Serena Kyle with her hand pressed over her nose and mouth. She was doing a bad job hiding the crimson steam flooding from her fingers. Suddenly, it felt like my world was crumbling in front of me. The two men started up the aisle, labeling each student. They held cans of spray paint like weapons, marking us with different colors. There were 3 colors, red, blue, and purple. When the kids started protests, tried to make a run for it, they were cuffed and shoved back into their seats. There was so much screaming and fighting, I couldn't hear what the men with spraying were saying. Nick grabbed my hand, and I grabbed Bobby's. When one of the men reached the kids in front of me, the front of their shirts were sprayed deep, dark blue. The men studied the three girls like they were pieces of meat. These are all good. The girls he was talking about started talking over each other, but he blanketed them. Blues will go into processing first. The purple will follow if we can fix them. The man's words filled my mouth with phantom bugs. Addie? Bobby swiped at my nose, her eyes widening. What's going on? I had a feeling she wasn't talking about the spray paint. When the guard reached my seat, he sprayed a red circle in front of my shirt. Red. That was new. Though I thought the guard was going to raise his hand at me, but instead he stuck his pudgy fingers through the blood crest under my nose. Defect, he said. What? He ignored me, moving on to Nick. Purple. He tried to pull off his shirt defiantly, only for the guard to slap him across the face. The man seemed to study my friend before grabbing Nick by the scruff of his neck. Pending, he grumbled, his fingernails grazing over the freckles dotted over my best friend's cheek. I'm not the one who will make a final choice. You better be as bright as you seem in a good light, kid. Nick stumbled back, his gaze flickering to me. Run. But there was nowhere to run. Bobby shrieked when the man sprayed a blue circle on the front of her dress. I tried to stop him, but I was dragged on my hair, ragged like a wild animal. This one's good too, he yelled to the front. When the men were finished to the spray cans, we were told to file off the bus and join our respected color groups. Nick tried to fight again, only to be punched in the face, but he still tried, swaying back and forth, screaming to be let go. When we tried to run, we were grabbed and thrown off the bus. I'm not sure how much time had passed. I was clinging on to my friends, and then they were pulled away. Nick and Bobby were treated like they mattered, forced into their own color groups. I was shoved onto my knees in dirt, which stained my legs. It was pouring, and my ponytail was plastered to my back. Other Reds were forced next to me. There were around 12 of us total. I know because I took snapshots of them, not names, not faces. Names hurt, so I remembered them by face. I remembered summer camp, summer forest next to me. I remembered dirt streaked down her face, blood dripping down her chin. That's what we all shared, the Reds. We had all suffered the same nosebleed, crimson streaking down our faces mixed with the rain. The 12 of us were put in a line in front of the bus. And when a woman in a pristine white suit and red hair dressed us in the red of her flashlight, I looked past her and my gaze found our camp. Not a camp. There's no sign of campsite, the thing I had expected all these years to my senior year. Instead, in front of us, there was a multi-story building in the distance. A group of purples and blues were escorted inside automatic doors. While we were left in the rain for hours, the sky turned light, then dark, and we were made to wait. We could have been there for days. I lost all sense of time. I lost all sense to my own humanity. I knew why they were doing this to us, but I was in denial. Then denial. When 12 became 11, and at 10, then 9, then 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Summer was screaming and I couldn't breathe. There were people in front of me. I knew them. I'd known them since childhood. Mr. Daughtry, the guy who lived across the street with his poodle, Gloria, Eve Simmons, who owned the diner Nick and Bobby and I had frequented for most of our lives, and Mr. and Mrs. State, the elderly couple who brought over pudding when I was homesick from school. All I remember is waiting to follow the others, squeezing my eyes shut and screaming into the night when a warm hand was sliding into mine and pulling me to my feet. There was a gunshot and the sound of a body hitting the ground. Summer. I remember Nick pulling me away, but I'll never forget Summer Forest's body lying in a heap, pooling red stem on a willowy blonde hair. I don't know how Nick got away, but all I recall is tripping over my own feet. He dragged us into trees and undergrowth as branches scratched at my face, pulling at my hair, but I didn't care. When Nick finally turned to look at me, I screamed. I screamed until he slapped his hand over my mouth, shutting me up. That's the last time I've seen my best friend. He definitely had two eyes, both intact. Now, one of them was hanging out like a cartoon. It was almost uncanny how inhuman he looked. Nicholas Castor was wearing what looked like a torn hospital scrubs. The skin on his face had been scraped away, leaving bloody flaps of flesh where his cheeks used to be. His lips were swollen, half of his hair sheared off, and yet somehow part of him looked beautiful, or at least start of beautiful. Nick had a jawline, but it was unfinished. Everything about him were incomplete. His mouth full of veneers were clumsy, like a psycho dentist has been playing with his teeth. It was hard to look at him. My friend had been mutilated. Nick spat a tooth into the dirt. "I got you," he managed to gasp, his voice slurring. He slowly removed his hand from my mouth, shaking his head when I opened my mouth to speak. "Shh." His smile was almost drunken. "It's okay. I got out. They had a ton of sedatives, so just bear with me." "Out? Out of where?" Nick held his eye inside his socket with one hand and held mine with the other. "Processing." The word rolled out of his tongue. He stopped like he was going to throw up. He threw a glance behind me before spewing lumps of red through his fingers. "Yep, processing. Processing. The art of being processed." "What are you talking about?" Nick pulled me further into the trees, flattening us into the dirt. "That place," he gasped. It's not a good place." I slapped him. I needed Nick to snap out of it. "Where is she?" I managed to speak. "Where's Bobby?" Nick looked completely sober for a second, blinking rapidly. He shook his head, and the fright and pain in his eyes sent my heart into my throat. His eyes were hollow, filled with darkness I could never and would never understand. Somehow, I already knew I'd lost him. "We're going to die, Addie," Nick said in a half giggle. His eyes rolled into the back of his head, his body hitting the ground with a soft thump. Following his declaration, a blinding searchlight illuminated my face. "We've got movement," a female voice yelled. Taking 2 steps back, I ducked into the overgrowth. Wherever that place was, Bobby was in there, and Nick, a purple, was my only way of getting anywhere near that place. So, hoisting my unconscious friend onto my shoulder, I turned and ran.